we've got something big on the horizon. A brand new Warhammer MMO is in development, and it's coming from a team that knows a thing or two about creating expansive online worlds. Stick around as we unpack what we know about this upcoming game, why it's got potential, and what fans should expect. Let's rewind the clock back to May 2023, when Jackalope Games rebranded themselves as Jackalyptic Games. Now, if you're like me, a rebrand might not be the sort of thing that gets your pulse racing, but this one was different because it came hand in hand with the announcement of a brand new Warhammer MMO. And this isn't some underfunded indie project pieced together by a bunch of mates. Jackalyptic Games is backed by NetEase, and leading the charge is a man who's no stranger to big online worlds, Jack Emmert. If you've ever had the pleasure, or pain, of getting lost in City of Heroes, Neverwinter, or Star Trek Online, you've already seen his work. So if anyone can take on the Warhammer universe, he's probably your guy. So, what can we expect from this MMO? Well, here's where things get interesting. We know it's a Warhammer game, but we don't actually know which Warhammer universe it's based in yet. Are we talking the dark, dystopian world of Warhammer 40k? Or is it the brutal medieval landscape of Warhammer Fantasy? 2. The old world is having a bit of a resurrection. Games Workshop has brought it back to the tabletop scene, so it wouldn't be a stretch to see it front and center in a new MMO. That said, I wouldn't count out 40k just yet. After all, who doesn't want to don power armor and charge headfirst into a battlefield filled with Tyranids and the odd heretic or two? On top of that, Space Marine 2 has done exceptionally well, so it would also make sense to piggyback off of that. We're left guessing for now, but it's fair to say both settings have a lot of potential for an online world. So let's talk about the people bringing this whole thing to life. At the helm, as I mentioned, is Jack, a man who's basically made a career out of building MMOs. Now, none of the games he's worked on were the next World of Warcraft, but they all had something important: dedicated communities. Emmert's worked on games like City of Heroes, Neverwinter, and Star Trek Online, and while these MMOs weren't necessarily breaking player records, they all brought something unique to the table. More importantly, they built loyal fan bases. Jackalyptic Games can manage that kind of community with this Warhammer MMO. We might have something special on our hands. And here's where things get really interesting. Jackalyptic Games isn't just sitting around brainstorming ideas. They've been steadily growing their team. They're hiring senior animators, and they've even started working on sound design already. Now, sound design this early in the game is a good sign. It's usually one of the last things you focus on, so it could mean that the groundwork is already pretty solid. Now, let's talk about gameplay for a second, specifically PvE versus PvP. Now, Warhammer fans might be expecting massive battles between players. After all, the tabletop game itself is built on conflict, as well as the original MMO Age of Reckoning. But according to Emmert, PvP won't be the focus this time around. Instead, we're looking at a game heavily leaning towards PvE. Now, that might seem a bit of a shock for an MMO, especially one based on Warhammer, but hear me out. Warhammer is full of rich lore and story-driven quests, and a PvE-focused game would allow players to properly dig into that world without constantly worrying about some other random player ganking them for sport. It's a bold move, but I think it does make sense. If you look at other successful MMOs, think Star Wars The Old Republic, or even Lord of the Rings Online, they've shown that you can have a strong PvE core with story-driven content and still make it engaging. PvP can be there for those who want it, but it's not the main attraction. Now, we obviously can't talk about modern MMOs without getting into the thorny topic of the business model. Will it be free to play, buy to play, or the dreaded subscription model? That has been keeping his cards close to his chest on this one, but he has mentioned the possibility of a battle pass system, something akin to what we've seen in Fortnite. Now, if you're like me, your heart might sink a little at the thought of heavy monetization, but there's hope yet. Ideally, we'd see a simple buy-to-play model where you just pay for the game and get the full experience. None of this pay-to-win nonsense, and no cash shop forced down your throat. I mean, I don't mind the odd cosmetic shop here and there. Who doesn't want to throw a little bit of money at a fancy cloak or a shiny sword skin? But the moment you start introducing level boosts or XP boosts, that's where things kind of get sticky. So, what's next? Well, as much as I'd love to tell you that this game is coming out next year, we're probably looking at a good 5, maybe 6 years before we can get our hands on it. That said, the fact that Jackalyptic Games is actively expanding their team and working on sound design means things are moving. We'll probably hear more in the next year or so, with some sneak peeks along the way. So, what do you think? Are you hoping for a 40k MMO, or are you crossing your fingers for a return to the old world? Either way, I am cautiously optimistic about this one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching. See you next time.